Sakuko is the character we see the least of from Hinako's trio of friends, and in fact she dies right at the start of the game, pretty much wiping her off the board right away. At least until she briefly returns as a boss, but we'll get to that in a minute. But as you play through the game more and more, unraveling more of the truth through alternative endings and more files, it becomes apparent that Sakuko isn't just some poor lost girl who loved sweets and was unceremoniously taken out by a fog monster to kickstart the events of the game. No, she might in fact even rival Hinako's powers. This week, let's take a look at the tragedy of Sakuko, the Lost Shrine Maiden. Sakuko is the first character we run into outside of Hinako's family at the beginning, and in a very Silent Hill way, the first thing we hear, before we even see her, is her saying, "You traitor," to Hinako who's just casually walking by. She's hanging out on the second floor of her house, and Hinako mentions that she's on her way to Chizuruya because she wants to talk to someone. Sakuko tells her she'll join her momentarily, and as Hinako walks away, Sakuko again calls her a traitor, although she herself doesn't even seem to realize she's saying this. If you check Hinako's journal at this point, she tells us that she's always got her head up in the clouds and is a little strange. Her father is head priest of Sennen Sugi Shrine, and Sakuko takes great pride in her shrine maiden role within the family. Basically, she's a little weird, and deeply related to the many divine events that are about to unfold. And while all four friends have a kind of weird but otherwise friendly chat in front of Chizuruya, Sakuko is the first to exit the story, almost immediately, as the fog monster kills her right in front of everyone. Rest in peace, we barely knew thee. But that's not the end of Sakuko's story, not even close. And it'll take numerous playthroughs to finally uncover who she really is and the important role she plays. Of course, it's not too long until we encounter Sakuko again, this time as a boss, and a rather formidable one at that. And if I dare say so, with perhaps the sickest design in the entire game. We also encounter Sakuko in her regular human form again, in the Dark Shrine, when Hinako must make the decision to kill off her old friends, which she does by leaving her in the dark, one of her greatest fears, causing her to have a heart attack. And that's about all we actually see of her in the game, but through her various diary entries and other files, and a little digging into the symbolism attached to her, an interesting portrait is painted of just how powerful Sakuko really is, and why, perhaps, even the fox feared her. In the pages from an observation log file, we learn that Hinako is Sakuko's first ever friend, and perhaps because of that, she's terrified of being abandoned by her. Young Hinako promised she would never ever do that, and Sakuko held her to that promise as they grew up. This is why the first thing we hear her say is traitor. After all, although we don't know it at the time, we later learn that Hinako is getting married. In Sakuko's 8th journal entry, she says, "I always said that we had to do everything together. Get boyfriends together, even get married together. I was jealous, and I couldn't even admit that to myself. I'm sorry, Hinako, for calling you a traitor." She felt that Hinako was abandoning her, and in her eyes, that made her a traitor. It's important to remember that the game also literally tells us that Sakuko has mild autism, found in a letter from the hospital in her letterbox, so all of her actions need to be viewed through this lens. But that's not all. In the letter from Sakuko's mother, we also discover that Sakuko is somewhat attuned to the divine. "You mustn't ever speak again about how you hear otherworldly voices talking or singing." It would appear that Sakuko's mother was also able to commune with the divine, but by this point of Japanese history, well, folks don't really look kindly upon women who say, "Hey, I can speak to the kami-sama." And so she tells her daughter to keep it to herself. She's just imagining things, and if people find out, they'll abandon her. This is a key point to Sakuko's character, and it likely comes from her mother forcing her back in the closet, if you will. On top of that, Sakuko also has a deathly fear of the dark. Why? Because it also reminds her of being alone. That fear that has been driven into her entire life. She just has to be normal. But Sakuko isn't normal. She's the daughter of a family that has served Ebisugaoka's divine forces for generations. And she has the ability to speak with those forces. And also, she's mildly autistic and dealing with a horrible fear of abandonment thanks to her mother forcing her to pretend to be something she's not. Normal. And it's in Sakuko's diary entries from New Game Plus onward that we discover just how powerful she is. She mentions that her grandfather wants to let Sennensugi Shrine end after his generation. Nobody bothers visiting it anymore, and most people just visit the small shrines all over town that are easier to reach. But Sakuko wants to restore the shrine to its former glory. She believes it still serves a purpose. After all, I've heard how the gods weep. Things get even more interesting when Sakuko has a dream. In it, she sees a cursed sword. She immediately cottons on that this sword must be the Tsukumogami's power source, and if purified, then the Tsukumogami will be weakened. She's doing all the heavy brain lifting so Hinako doesn't have to, helping her from, the other side, if you will. In yet another dream, a god appears before her and commands her to restore Sennensugi Shrine. The next night, a different god tells her she mustn't. Which to believe? Sakuko doesn't even hesitate. She'll listen to the first god. She'll restore Sennensugi Shrine to its former glory. After all, my dream is to restore Sennensugi Shrine too. Who is the god that wants Sakuko to restore the shrine? The Tsukumogami, the original god who used to be worshipped there. And the one who doesn't? The fox, who stole the Tsukumogami's position of power in the village. Sakuko's choice greatly upsets the fox. And remember, at this point she is technically a shrine maiden for this fox. And so, it responds. Foolish maiden, you wish to serve a malevolent god. I shall crush that empty head of yours. Is it any wonder that Sakuko was then the first to die when the fog monster was unleashed on Hinako and her friends at the start of the game? Seems the fox is great at holding a grudge too. And so, much like Hinako herself, Sakuko also finds herself stuck in the middle of this divine war, and the Tsukumogami strikes back at the fox, killing her, by unleashing Sakuko as a fearsome boss in the Dark Shrine, the fox's home turf. This Sakuko is transformed into a fearsome shrine maiden visage, and perhaps the most telling aspect of her power is the halo of rays around her head. You know who else has a halo of rays in Japanese mythology? Yeah, this lady. Amaterasu, the sun god and head of the Japanese pantheon. This visual isn't a coincidence. It's supposed to show just how powerful this shrine maiden is. And you might also note that Sakuko is the only boss in the game that nobody actually defeats. Foxmask steps in to save Hinako before Sakuko ends her, and because this is his realm, he's able to banish her. But it clearly takes a toll on him. Sakuko is indeed not a normal girl. In fact, if you visit Sakuko's family shrine in New Game Plus, you're treated to an interesting and somewhat creepy scene of Sakuko, dressed in her shrine maiden robes, carrying out some sort of ceremony inside the shrine. What does this scene mean? Why can you only see it during New Game Plus? Well, the fox has tried to drive Sakuko away from Hinako numerous times. But as the saying goes, I lived, bitch. Sakuko is still fighting for Hinako in a way only she can. Perhaps she's trying to protect her, or perhaps she's performing a ritual to lessen the fox's power. But after everything she's been through, after her feelings of being abandoned by her first friend, who promised she would never leave her behind, she's still fighting for her. She's not leaving her completely alone to deal with these divine forces that want to tear her apart. Sakuko is a ride or die kind of friend. You can even find a note in the school where Sakuko warns Hinako not to play the fox's sacrifice game. Sakuko knows that it's not just a silly game. And the fox isn't telling people their futures, it's deciding them for itself. You have to promise me you won't join in, even as a joke. Even if you don't believe it yourself. Please. Considering that the blackboard tells us how everyone is going to die, and how Hinako will be spirited away, again, it's not like she's pulling this stuff out of thin air to scare her. Sakuko has been looking out for her all this time, and the fox fears that. In fact, Sakuko may be the only character in the game, other than the gods and Kotoyuki, who is possessed by one of the gods, who can actually reach Hinako as her two inner selves battle it out. That's why I believe we see Sakuko dancing at the shrine in New Game Plus. She's aware of what's going on back in the real world, and doing her best to help as only she can. Momentarily, just momentarily, she's able to break through into this divine landscape so she can lend Hinako a hand. And if you're wondering about Sakuko back in the real world, the third page of the observation log seems to let us know. Hey, Mr. Rabbit, guess what? I heard Hinako's gonna go somewhere far, far away, and she might never ever come back. I'm so alone and sad. No frowns allowed. It's a good thing. I gotta smile as I say goodbye to Hinako. Tomorrow, I'm gonna show Hinako my biggest, widest grin when I tell her how happy I am for her. She's come to accept that her friend is getting married, that she's not actually a traitor, and she's going to tell her how happy she is. Right after she gives that fox hell, of course. But what did you guys think of this one? What do you think of Sakuko and her role in the game? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you again next time.